Fairmont crest, not every secret begins with an explosion. Some earthquakes arrive very slowly, very quietly, like a hairline crack running beneath the glossy surface of people who seem to have learned how to live on half-truths. They slip into archived files, hide behind sterile test results, lie still in hospital refrigerators, and wait for the exact right moment to blow everything apart. This time, what could bring down more than one relationship is not an affair or an impulsive accusation. It is blood. It is lineage. It is a DNA result so cold it feels cruel, a sheet of paper so emotionless yet powerful enough to turn everything into a battlefield. When the names Grayson and Joey appeared in the same chain of genetic matches, the already unstable world surrounding Garland Memorial shifted into an even more dangerous realm. From that moment on, every glance changed, every question carried the scent of threat. And those who thought they were in control began to realize they might only be pieces in a scheme set in motion years ago. The first person to touch that truth was not Joey, and not Grayson, but Laya. She never wanted to find it this way. It was not a personal investigation she had planned from the beginning, but a small system discrepancy. An unusual signal that crossed her desk while she was trying to trace the holes surrounding the plasma ring operation. In her position of authority at the hospital, Laya was used to reading files the way she read people, used to numbers that never lied even when human beings lied flawlessly. But this time, she was the one wishing the result was wrong. She wanted the testing machine to be faulty. She wanted someone to have switched the labels. She wanted it to be nothing more than a stupid technical error, because if it was real, it would not only alter Grayson's identity, it would force her to face a truth she may have sensed for a long time, but had never dared to name. Because Laya was not really watching Grayson only out of managerial duty. She had always told herself that she kept an eye on him because he was volatile, because he carried shadows that were hard to explain, because he appeared at the exact moment the hospital began leaking blood and plasma. Because the links surrounding that network were increasingly pointing toward familiar faces inside the institution. That was the explanation she used to keep herself steady in her role as an observer. But beneath that, there was something else that had clung to her since the day Grayson walked into Garland Memorial with that defensive stare. With anger always seeming to simmer just beneath the surface, and with a kind of silence too much like someone who had spent his whole life doubting where he truly belonged. Laya saw in Grayson not only danger, but a walking secret. And her fear kept growing not because she did not know what the truth was, but because she was beginning to suspect she knew too much. The DNA result made all the layers of control Laya had built around herself suddenly feel fragile. If Grayson and Joey were brothers, then who had hidden that truth all these years? If Joey was actually Grayson's biological father, then how dark must his past be for a child to be pushed away from his name, his bloodline, and the most basic recognition a human life deserves? And if that result had not surfaced by accident but had been deliberately placed in her hands, then Laya was standing in the middle of a trap designed not only to expose a family secret, but to destroy the fragile order between the hospital, Fairmont Crest, and the underground network draining blood from the very places meant to save lives. Meanwhile, Grayson was no longer someone who could survive on bursts of irritation or a few vague deflections to protect himself. He had moved too close to the edge. In recent days, the pressure around him had thickened into something suffocating. The looks at the hospital had changed, certain files disappeared and then reappeared. A sample code had its access time altered. A storage room had been opened at an hour when no one had authorization to be there. And above all, there was that feeling of being watched from several directions at once, as if someone no longer wanted to push him away, but wanted to force him into the center of the storm. Grayson was used to hiding. He knew how to construct a life that looked poor, irritable, and detached to conceal the more complicated parts of himself. He knew how to appear like a man simply trying to survive, get through his shifts, and endure a world that had always been unfair to him. But only those who live close to darkness understand that the more irrational a person's anger seems, the more likely it is that he is panicking over something too large to keep buried. While Leia held the test result in her hand, Grayson was the first to sense that something had changed. He had not seen the paper, but he saw the difference in the way Leia fell silent. Her silence was no longer the kind that came from professional warning or coldness from a superior. It was heavy, leaden silence, as if any word spoken aloud might set off an explosion. And that made Grayson angry before he was ever questioned. For those who carry secrets about bloodlines, anger is not merely an emotion. It is a defensive reflex. It is the instinct of someone who has lived too long without knowing why he was abandoned. Grayson's rage was not aimed at one specific person. It swept across everything. It turned toward Leia because she looked at him for too long. It turned toward Joey because the mere sound of that name made his blood feel like it froze. It turned inward toward his own body, his own face, and the similarities he may have noticed long ago but forced himself to dismiss as coincidence. If Leia confronted him directly, Grayson would not shatter immediately. He would fight back with scorn, with denial, with the attitude that all of it was just another attempt by the hospital to manipulate him. But that resistance would not come from complete innocence. It would come from someone trying to keep the final door from bursting open. Because the most terrifying possibility is not that Grayson knows nothing, but that he has known part of it all along. Maybe not through files, maybe not through proof, but through fragments of memory, the silences in his mother's stories, the times Joey's name was mentioned and then abruptly erased, the anonymous help that appeared at the exact right moment, the opportunities that seemed random but kept repeating as if guided by a distant hand. If Grayson confessed that he had suspected the truth for years, then what would be destroyed would not only be the trust between him and Leia, but also the last shred of sympathy anyone might still have for him. When a person knows his life rests on a lie and still continues to protect that lie, he is no longer only a victim. He becomes part of the mechanism of concealment. Joey, on the other side of the storm, is the most dangerous figure of all because he has too many reasons to deny everything. Joey is not the kind of man who can be shattered by a test result alone. He has walked through enough darkness to understand that truth is only terrifying when it falls into the right hands. In the hands of the weak, truth is only pain. In the hands of the intelligent, it becomes a weapon. What makes Joey frightening is that no one knows what role he is playing in his own story. Maybe he truly does not know who Grayson is to him, and the shock would rip apart the control he has always maintained in front of Vanessa, Fairmont Crest, and even the violent past he once tried to bury. But it is also possible that Joey has known for a very long time, long enough to understand that a son or a brother carrying his blood would become a fatal weakness the day an enemy discovered it. In that case, all the hesitant closeness, the evasiveness about the past, the shadows surrounding his finances and underground ties would take on a different meaning. No longer the signs of a man running from old pain, but of someone who built an entire system of silence to protect himself from the day his own blood would drag him down. Joey's fury, if this secret were exposed, would not be explosive rage. It would be colder, crueler, more calculated. He would not smash things or scream like people who simply lose control. Joey would begin with absolute denial, then move to tracing who accessed the files, who had authority to enter the storage room, who stood to benefit if this information surfaced while the plasma ring was already tightening around everyone's throat. For someone like Joey, bloodline is not just personal. It is something that can be used for blackmail, overthrow, and the distortion of power. If Grayson is his biological son, then who is the mother? Why was her name erased from the child's life? And why has this secret resurfaced now, just as the hospital is under threat? If Grayson is his half-brother, then what kind of fraudulent life did their father live? And how many more people were sacrificed to keep that family name spotless in public? Laya is trapped in the middle of those questions, like someone caught in a snare with no way out. She could keep the results secret and continue investigating in silence, but the longer she remains quiet, the more suspicious she becomes. She could confront Grayson directly, but if she does that without preparation, she may trigger the most dangerous defensive reaction in him. She could also go straight to Joey, but that would be the riskiest choice of all, because if Joey really has known all along, he would immediately understand what Laya was holding and would never let her leave the game with that advantage. Laya's conflict, therefore, is not only between conscience and duty, it is also between truth and survival. She wants to believe she is doing the right thing, but the deeper she digs into the records, the more she sees that the irregularities in the testing chain are not accidental. A blood sample was relabeled. One test was moved to another machine without explanation. A late-night access entry appeared under an ID code that had already been deleted. Someone is manipulating the system, but whether that person is manipulating it to hide the truth or to force Laya into becoming the one who uncovers it is what makes the situation truly terrifying. From that point on, the story is no longer just a family secret. It becomes entangled with the plasma ring in the most disturbing way. Blood is not only proof of lineage. At Garland Memorial, blood is also money, product, something that can be stolen, switched, misrecorded, disappear, and then reappear under different codes. If a network can manipulate plasma supply, then manipulating test data is no longer unthinkable. And that opens a horrifying possibility. The DNA result may be real, but someone has kept it buried for years through the same web of manipulation inside the hospital. Or this result may only now have been allowed to surface because someone wants to pit Joey and Grayson against each other, wants to destroy any remaining hidden alliance, wants to drag Laya into the light as a sacrificial pawn. The most terrifying kind of conspiracy does not need to invent a false truth. It only needs to choose the perfect moment to release a real one. The deeper Laya digs, the more she realizes that Grayson is not the minor link she once believed him to be. Maybe he joined the plasma ring not only for money. Maybe he was drawn into it from very early on, not by greed, but by an unconscious pull toward the very place where the secret of his life had been hidden. A child who grows up with a void in his bloodline carries an invisible hunger, the hunger to know who he is, where he belongs, why his life always seems to be thrown toward the margins. If someone knows how to exploit that void, they can turn Grayson into the perfect tool, angry enough to do reckless things, wounded enough to be manipulated, smart enough to handle dirty work, and isolated enough that no one can pull him back before it is too late. In that vision, the plasma ring is not only a criminal operation. It is a machine that feeds on people deprived of the truth about themselves, then uses that very wound to bind them. When Laya finally decides she can no longer stay silent, the confrontation between her and Grayson will not unfold like a simple scene of exposure. It will be two people standing in front of each other carrying too many layers of emotion to speak plainly. She is angry at him because he always evades, because he always uses his temper as a shell, because he keeps forcing her to doubt both her instincts and her professionalism. But at the same time, she is angry at herself for letting her concern go beyond what a colleague should ever feel. Grayson sees in her eyes what he fears most, not contempt, but disappointment. And that is what truly makes him lose control. If he denies it, he will have to deny it completely, even if it means destroying the rare connection between them. If he admits that he has suspected the truth for a long time, then he will have to expose the chain of decisions that led him toward the plasma ring, toward Joey, toward the edge of the abyss. No matter which path he chooses, there is no way for him to remain the same man he was before. Joey will inevitably be dragged into the center, and when that happens, all of Fairmont Crest will tremble. A man accustomed to controlling his own narrative will be forced to face blood as an indictment. If Grayson is his son, Joey will have to relive a chapter of his life he buried deeply, a chapter where lust, violence, power, and cowardice may all have existed side by side. If Grayson is his brother, then their father's name will pull with it a history of betrayal powerful enough to destroy more than one family. In either possibility, Joey loses. He loses the right to stand outside it. He loses the privilege of treating the past like a locked room. And what will enrage him most is that the person holding the key is not him, but Leia. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video, and thank you for your trust. All the content I create is purely speculative and based on personal experience. If you find the video interesting and helpful, please support me with a like and a comment. But in a world like Beyond the Gates, the moment truth is revealed is never the end point. It is only the doorway to the next layer of conspiracy. When several files vanish the very night Leia prepares to disclose the result, when a key hospital hallway camera fails for exactly 11 minutes, when a login that had been deactivated months ago suddenly appears again in the access history, everything immediately shows that this is no longer a story about 3 people. There is a larger hand moving behind the scenes. Someone wants Leia to panic, wants Grayson to lose his mind, wants Joey to reveal his true reaction. Someone needs this bloodline secret to erupt in order to cover another plasma shipment or to divert an investigation that is getting too close to the center of the network. And at that point, the most frightening question is no longer what Grayson is to Joey. The real question is who kept this secret alive all the way until now so it could be used as a detonator. From that moment on, no one can go back to where they were before. Leia will have to choose between protecting the hospital and protecting the people being torn apart right in front of her. Grayson will have to decide whether he wants the whole truth or whether he prefers to keep living through the anger that is easier to control than pain. Joey will have to choose between confessing to his past or destroying everything that could tie him to it. And that is where the story becomes most merciless. Sometimes what destroys people is not the lie itself, but the moment when they can no longer go on living without the truth. The blood secret between Grayson and Joey, whether it makes them brothers or father and son, will not only change how they see each other. It will expose the way Fairmont Crest itself functions through deliberate silence, through relationships distorted in service of power, through morality that bends according to advantage. And if the plasma ring truly is tied to this secret, then this is not the ending of a twist. It is only the moment the story pushes those 3 characters into a place where they have nothing left to shield themselves with except survival instinct. That is why the most compelling question is not what the DNA says, but what version of themselves each of them will become after learning it. In that world of closed gates and coldly lit hospital corridors, blood has never been only blood. It is history, evidence, debt, guilt, and perhaps also the curse that, in the end, no one is strong enough to escape.